Hi, I'm Jay, and today we're going to tie some stinger hooks onto some 3/4 flats, and we'll talk a little bit about some of my plans for the upcoming season. Stay tuned. Holy cow! A little bit out of a little bit out of practice, running the buttons, I guess. So good morning. Just like that little intro said, short little video. I was tying some stinger hooks onto some 3/4 flatheads, and I started thinking about upcoming projects to do this coming season. It seems like most tyers on the internet, on YouTube in particular, we have more time and we're indoors more during the cold season, right, the winter season, and we're doing the majority of our videos. So I started thinking about, what should we do for future videos, upcoming videos. What do I want to touch on? What do I think is important in what I'm trying to do here with the YouTube, right? So one of the things that are very popular, and as I talk, let me just switch over. One of the things that is very popular is the basic videos that I do, the beginner type stuff. People also really like the almost live format, which I enjoy myself, actually. It's reminiscent of those times where I would just stand next to my father's tying bench and just watch him for hours, right? As a young boy. But so today, as I was tying these stinger hooks, and real quick, this is a custom order for a guy that will fish these in the St. Lawrence River up in the northern end of New York. A custom hook. It's a 91751 Mustad Limerick hook. The size is a 3/0, so it's pretty stout, pretty heavy duty. Mostly for walleye, but they're also getting some good sized pike as well. So this head is a 3/4 flat. It's from a do-it mold, and I'm just adding these stinger hooks, which we've tied in a previous video. I've done a couple videos on snelling the hooks and tying stingers onto your hook. But as I was doing these, I began thinking about after the holiday season, Thanksgiving and Christmas, what videos would I be planning? Now, we know that I've been pretty upfront in the past that I don't script anything that I'm doing. This is all very, raw and realistic as I can show. I'm not interested in doing so much editing and take after take after take to kind of hide the fact that we do make mistakes, and we do sometimes a person's style or as a tyer evolves or is apparent through the way they react to mistakes. So you know, as you're tying, I might make a mistake, but I also know that if I adjust my wrap or the angle of the thread, I know that I can work with the mistake I just made, right? And that just comes down to experience and skill and knowing different techniques. But as I was thinking about that, so I'm sitting here tying, and doing something like this is a very simple process. It's just wrap after wrap after wrap, and it really seems fairly insignificant. But I started thinking that this task of doing something as simple as sitting down and tying 10 dozen heads with stinger hooks, what does that teach somebody? Because you're, as a new tyer, you're absolutely practicing a technique that is used on every single jig. You're practicing a technique that you use in all forms of tying. You're tying ice jigs, you're tying bucktails, you're tying streamers, dry flies. This is a practice. This is a activity that is part of all of tying, right? And that's just the simple fact or the simple task of wrapping thread. Having thread on a bobbin and attaching it to a hook shank, creating a knot. So in starting my thread, I'm locking on the thread, a very simple technique, the first thing you have to learn, right, as we tie. Locking it in the center of the hook shank, that's a little bit different than locking it up towards the head. Not much, but it is, right? It's something different. So I started thinking about my opinions on jig tying as not just a spectator, right? I watch videos just like everybody else. But as a jig tyer, what my opinion is that every jig is basically the same thing. You're doing the same steps. You work usually in the same manner. Now there are some exceptions to the rules, but as a general rule, we build a jig. We tie from left to right. You know, if you're left-handed or I don't know, you just do things backwards. Of course, you know, I've seen guys wrap backwards, right? Right-handed, but they wrap backwards. Left-handed, but they wrap backwards, right? People use different types of vise. A different vise that might be angled, that might not have a rotary function. You know, there's all sorts of different things at play. But for the most part, tying a jig is exactly the same. Whether you're tying a bucktail for walleye, or you're tying a smaller jig for crappie fishing, or a micro jig for bluegill, right? So I find it odd. I've never been impressed with, and I find it odd when you get jigs with all of these fancy names. You know, we've all heard of nuclear chicken and monkey milk, you know, all kinds of corny names, right? And I'm not impressed with that. I never have been. Like, that's just to sell it to a fisherman. You know, if a guy came to me and said he wants an electric chicken, okay, I know what that is. I can tie it. But if an old timer came to me and said I want a chartreuse and a hot pink combination on a crappie jig, I know what he's talking about too, right? So my thoughts of one new type of video to add is building off that beginners tying type video, you know, specifically for beginners, and maybe doing quick short videos that maybe look at at one individual technique a little bit more in detail. So when it comes to, you know, using your thread and your bobbin, the simple task of learning how to lock your thread on, maybe talking about open wraps versus touching wraps as we lock on our thread. Now for this, what I'm doing right now, I lock my thread on with some touching wraps in the center of the hook shank. So that's 3 different skills in our techniques, right? So to lash on the stinger hook, I line this up, and then I continue with touching wraps towards the bend of the hook, and then touching wraps back. Now as I demonstrate this and explain it, we could also tie this on with open wraps, as we see here, because we know that when we go back over those open wraps with touching wraps, that we are overlapping some of those wraps and locking them into place. Maybe going into a little bit more detail of, yes, the tension on my thread and my bobbin was firm, but I'm not looking to keep this stinger hook in place exclusively with tight wraps. And it takes a little bit getting used to. I think when you watch some tires, you'll see people describe locking the hair on just by the tension that you're putting on your thread. And that's not 100% what we're doing as tires. We lock the thread in place. We tie material in a way, as you've seen. We'll see when I put hair on these jigs. The simple act of putting a V, you know, tying it so your hair will flare slightly and creates a V, you know, and there's different things that we do, you know, having a tight pinch, wrapping nice and firmly, that allows for that to be to work all together to create a strong jig. So that's what I'm thinking about. All right, so a video of just using your thread, a video of how to lock on hair and other materials, a video of just thinking about when we look at a jig, how would I tie that? How would I tie from left to right? Right? So that's really what's kind of been bouncing around in my head the last couple days, and I really, you know, I just started thinking about it here now. In talking about, you know, my opinion, how a jig is just a jig. Okay, I don't usually give them a fancy name. I might describe them by color. You know, we do call a perch jig that 3-color, you know, black, orange, yellow. We call that a perch pattern. But I don't give it any other fancy name. Because it just is what it is, okay? And that's just a personal thing for me. I'm sure I'm going to shake some people up. Go ahead if you want to challenge that line of thought, or if you have different ideas on naming jigs, on how they catch fishermen versus how they catch fish. Are names even important for your jigs, right? Put some of those comments down below. I'm not saying my way is the only way. There's 100 million ways to tie, and I'm not looking to throw shade on other tires in particular. But I've been thinking about, you know, what's my philosophy, right, in tying. Okay, I think a jig is just a jig. It's a very simple, basic thing. Regardless of the materials that you put on it. You might put 10 materials. Is that better than a jig with just 2 materials? A jig with just hair, 2 colors of hair, versus hair and tinsel and spinner blades and bells and whistles and anything else you could add to it. I don't think so. And as I've explained before, I consider myself more of a traditionalist in terms of materials and techniques. That could be argued too, because this is the 21st century, right? But I think that's what we're going to do with some of the videos. We'll still do the almost lives. I would like to, if my schedule would settle down just a little bit, I would love to plan a live session fairly regularly. And of course do a lot more jig tying. So as the seasons, as we get into the winter time, Thanksgiving, Christmas, before the ice forms here in New York State, so I'm not fishing, I'll be doing some more videos concentrating on very basic steps in conversations of or a discussion about philosophy, right? My philosophy on tying jigs, I guess, as we learn some very basic techniques. This is just a small sample, I guess, today, putting on those stinger hooks, and we'll expand on that more. I will probably end this video here, but the eagle-eyed viewers will probably notice I'm going to put hair on these, and we'll just do a regular video. It'll be edited nicely, and it'll look like just a regular video, as to not waste time, and since I have everything all set up. So I think that will do it for us today. If you have any ideas, okay, and I'm talking, I guess, specifically to the couple groups that do use the videos for training and learning, I think that's great. If you have any ideas or things that you want to really look at, put some comments down below. I could do overhead shots. I have enough equipment where if you're not seeing the angles that you want or the detail that you want, just let me know. I'll accommodate that. And just viewers in general, if you have some ideas on what you think is important in tying jigs, or an aspect that you think is more important over another, and that you just want to see that in more detail, we'll do that. As always, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any new content, especially as we're going to be doing some of these different types of videos. And I'm hoping to get back in that schedule of at least once a week, sometimes twice. So, but I think that will do it for us today. I'm going to kind of reset, heat up my coffee a little bit, and we'll get into putting hair on these jigs. But until next time, guys, keep tying in tight lines.